think we have to change that analogy. I'm not sure bus driver is the right thing I ought to be anymore, but anyway.
We can work on it.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm excited today to have Sarah Mock from our Planning Services Bureau talk about the employee survey. So, you know, this is the survey that when did we field this again? I can't remember.
January.
January, okay. So this is the survey that you all responded to. And I think we pushed this out. I mean, we posted the results, so you could see those on the intranet site. But Sarah's going to go through the results, kind of the high points, answer any questions you have, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what the executive team is doing in response to, or planning to do, in response to the survey. And then I'll give you just a bus driver's report and other things. So I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Yay. So thank you for being here. I know it's because I'm here and not because Gerd's talking next. I've also decided I will not do any dance or karaoke since I have a microphone. But Gerd did kind of go over our agenda, so we'll just kind of skip right through there. But do you have a bingo card on your chair? Does everyone have one? Okay, and a pen, hopefully, to mark off your squares as we go through. I'm not actually going to call bingo squares, so it's more of a word search in the bingo form. But if you do get a bingo, please, you don't need to shout it out, as tempting as that may be. Just mark them off, and we'll do some check-ins along the way. So why do we do the employee survey? I think this might be an obvious question, but at the same time, I think it bears just going back through why we do that for all of us to be cognizant. Measuring our engagement. It's kind of nice to put a number on how our employees feel rather than just giving us a sense of how things are. My impression might be very different than Sylvia's impression, very different than Gerd's impression of what's happening across the department. So as much as I love surveys and quantifying it, I will also acknowledge that there's a lot of qualitative data in here too. It does give us a voice at all different levels of the department. It's not just management making those decisions. Our division directors and our deputy directors and our program staff are all answering this with no distinction between who's giving that response. In the past, I think there was a little bit of a filter question that allowed us to look at the responses by division, and we've actually taken that away to increase the anonymity of it. And directions for our next steps. I think that this is obvious, but this is a really useful tool in determining where some of our kind of lacking areas might be that can tell us what we need to do over the next year as we look forward. And it really just identifies those areas for improvement. And benchmarking our results. This survey is based off of the Baldrige survey, so it does give us some comparison across other organizations, and it does allow us to look at ourselves over time. So we've been doing this since 2011, and I think it's going to be kind of neat to look at those results over time. Sandy, am I echoing a little bit? Okay. I don't know. How do you do that? And of course, it is related to our FAB. We've been doing this since 2011, so FAB is not the impetus for doing an employee survey, but it does relate to Domain 8 and having a competent public health care workforce, and specifically that 8.2.2a, getting good at saying all those numbers and letters together. And employee satisfaction is directly mentioned in the FAB requirements. So I mentioned Baldrige, and when I first started at IDPH, I was like, where did this survey come from? Because coming from PRAMS, I was thinking, oh, where did these questions develop? What's the standard for them? And I think it was 2012 that I found the Baldrige connection. It got published in the employee survey report, and I thought, okay, that lends a lot of credibility for me as somebody who's a fan of surveys and having that comparison. But I also think it's neat to know that this is a tool that's being used in a lot of different organizations, not just nonprofit, but business sectors as well. And they use it over time to look at the functionality of their organizations in the different areas. So we're really buying into something that is established and has credibility in a lot of different arenas, not just a nonprofit or a public health or government survey, although it is run by the U.S. Department of Commerce. So, any bingos yet? Anybody even get a letter? No? Anybody? I actually forgot what's on the bingo card, so I should probably try to say things like silos. Okay, so how did we do this year and how are we doing over time? And just to orient everyone, we do have our benchmark there in the black, and 70% is our benchmark. And 2014 is missing on the bottom, and that's not a typo. We did not do a survey in 2014. So you'll notice that that year is not on any of the charts. But that 70% is what we have decided, and Baldridge as well, is indicative of a well-functioning organization, but one that still has room for improvement. So we are, oh, yes. We hit 70% for the first time, so round of applause for yourselves. You are satisfied as employees. We do have 42 questions on this year's survey. In the past, it's been 40, so we did add 2 new questions, and I will talk about those. And the 70% is the average of all of the questions for this particular overall score of 70%, not specific areas or specific focus areas. And I did want to say we had over 320 responses this year, or 320 exactly. So that's why you got a Jeans Day on March 23rd. And so thanks, Sarah, for letting us do that. I think that there was some grumbling that some people missed it and won a week. I don't know. I'm not going to name names.
I'll make a note.
Okay. And this chart is just showing us how many of our questions are meeting that 70%. So in 2017, 25 questions of the 42 did have 70% of us agreeing or strongly agreeing that with the question. And this is compared to that 14 in 2011. So obviously, as we get better and get towards that 70% overall, we'd like to see the number of questions as well increasing that were strongly agreed or agreed to. And likewise, by the same token, that red should continue to get smaller. So we'll see what 2018 brings. And I like this slide, not because I think you could read it well, but just to be able to show the comparison between the 7 different focus areas on the survey. It just gives us a sense of where everything is. Again, the blue line is our benchmark, with the green line being our data points around each of those areas. And I'll go into a little bit of detail, but just to be able to compare them in one slide. So leadership. We have seen a 12% increase since 2011. And we did have 2 questions that went over 70% for the first time. And I do want to tell you what those were. So let me get to my notes. The department management uses our department's values to guide us, and the department creates a work environment that helps me do my job. So I think that that's impressive that those are the 2 things within leadership that are moving up over that 70% mark. And there is one, which is kind of funny that I'm presenting on this question, but department management asks what I think, and that one is one that remains below 55% and has for a while. So we'll just go with that as being the oddity. I felt like we were asking. But I will say, in the comments, there were people who said, this is the only time I know of that I'm asked for my input is in the employee survey. So just how people are interpreting the question may be playing into that. Strategic planning. This is our tough nut to crack, I think. We have seen an increase since 2011, but we're not hitting that benchmark. It also really suffers from having the question of IDP just flexible and can make changes quickly when needed, and that one has been at 35% or below since 2011. And we are a state agency. It's hard to be flexible in a state agency, and maybe Gerd and Sarah have something to add to that, but I feel like this section does not benefit from having that question in it. But all of the other questions in this section have seen an increase over the years. And I will say that the comments in this area really spoke to staff being appreciative of having different staff levels involved in the strategic planning process, but they did want more information on how it would be implemented. And I think the timing of that, with having the strategic plan rolled out in January and the employee survey coming out in January, sort of lends to that as well. So hopefully, as we've been getting the emails from Sarah and Jen, I'm not sure who's sending them out, about what we're doing around the different goals, we're understanding a little bit more about the implementation process. And this one did have a new, or really rather revised question on it. We changed a question to just clarify the connection to the strategic plan. We had in the past, I know the parts of the department's plan that affect me and my work. And we changed that to, I see a clear link between my work and the department's strategic plan. So same concept, but we wanted to be reflective of what we were moving forward with in the strategic plan. Customer and market. This has always been above 70%. So we judge ourselves very well in understanding our customer and their needs and their wants. But there's this odd disconnect with, I ask if my customers are satisfied or dissatisfied with my work. Less than 60% of us do that. So we think we know what our customers want and need, but we don't ask about their satisfaction, and that's what we're telling ourselves. So just something to think about, because we do rate ourselves very highly in understanding what our customers need or want. And it does have the little neutral thumb just because it hasn't gone up since 2011. Measurement analysis and knowledge management, 12% since 2011, but we do have those two questions that sit below 70%, and that's, I know how the measures I use fit in my work fit into the department's overall measures of improvement, and I know how the department as a whole is doing, and those are at 66 and 50%, respectively. So I think that Gerd will talk a little bit about that second part of it. I know how the department is doing as a whole, and hopefully as our performance management system evolves, that first question, I know how the measures fit into my work, will also increase. I think we have work to do in that area, and I guess that's my job. So I'll do that too, not just send out surveys. Human resources, and we're doing a better job in this area as well. We've been increasing since 2011, and we do have 3 questions that go below 70%, so in the other questions we rate ourselves very high is how this kind of worked out. I'm recognized for my work is what received the lowest percentage of agree or disagree, and that was at 62. And employee recognition really was a theme that was in the comments as well, and this showed up in multiple areas, but predominantly in the human resources. So I think some of the things that we're doing will increase that recognition over the years, so hold us accountable and see if that improves, but note that we noted the comments regarding the employee recognition. And operations in QI, so yay, 70% for the first time ever, yay. I'm like looking at Marissa and Joy to give them high fives. This area did have 2 new questions. That I have influence in improving my work process was really a companion question to the question regarding defining my work process. And we wanted to recognize that not everybody is able to define what they do on a daily basis, but they do have control over how they might be doing it. So if you have to take customer calls, that is what you're going to do during the day. But how do you do it may be where you can make your mark in improving that process. And the other question was, I am satisfied with the information I receive about what's going on in other parts of the department. And only 50% of us agreed with this question. So I think that that's something that we'll be working on in terms of communication. And comments in this really spoke to the bus stop trainings, the QI council, and again, that need for communication across the department. So I think the comments and the question responses were nicely aligned. But I did want to acknowledge that there were a lot of positive comments around the bus stops and the QI training, and in general, workforce development, in-house trainings. So results. We're still below 70%. I know it looks like we're touching there. It's actually 69%. But we did have one question that went over, and that was IDPH helps me help my community. It went past that 70% mark. And I thought that was a really good feeling, that we feel like we're actually getting to help our community and that we're acknowledging it in this survey. Employee recognition, again, showed up in this arena. And I did want to point out the two areas that are the lowest performing in the survey overall are in this results section, and that's, I know how well IDPH is doing financially, and IDPH removes things that get in the way of progress, and those have both historically low in the low 30s of a percentage of us agreeing with that. So, any bingos? All right, I think I'm wired to this thing. I can't move very well. Can I hand it?
Yeah.
There's prizes. Don't take them if you didn't get a bingo. All right, and so this just brings us back to our strategic plan. Goal 2 has a lot of measurements that are within the strategic, or within the employee survey too. So we're hoping to use the employee survey to measure some of those aspects of the strategic plan goal 2. Specifically around workforce, we had the 2 questions about department management encourages me to develop my job skills, and IDPH has the right people and skills to do its work. Obviously, these are not doing as well as we would like at 64 and 55%. I will say the comments in this section were, again, we appreciate the in-house trainings. I don't have the opportunity necessarily to do trainings outside of the department, so I'm glad that these are available here. The right skills and the right people. A lot of the comments in this area were about the hiring practices, which I think is something that is hard to take control of, but I mean, it's acknowledged. Quality improvement. We're over 70%. I don't know. Can we just skip this section? We're doing great. No. So again, this goal 2 in quality improvement. I think it'll be interesting to see how the QI Council is developed and takes on some of this, and to see where this goes. It's already doing well, but there's always room for improvement. And again, the improving my work process was the new question that was added here. Communication. We have a whole slew of questions related to communication. I don't think we realized it until we started listing them out, exactly which ones are related to communication on this survey and we can use for measuring our strategic plan progress. But the bolded ones, or the ones in red, I guess, are those that really are underperforming. I guess 2C could also be included in there, but I think that that's improving as over the years. But the new question, 6F, I'm satisfied with the information I receive. I think we're really excited to see what some of the action items are that we'll do around communicating and ensuring that we all are on the same page. And 2D, I think that goes back to me and performance management. So we'll be looking at some good measures. So comments, I've mentioned this throughout in the different sections, but just to know that these were probably the 5 most common themes that were in the comments. And again, if you remember the survey, there was an option of answering an open-ended question after each focus area, as well as at the very end of the question if you had any general comments. I think that the structural and building improvements, it's been fun to see the painting going on. I think that had nothing to do with our employees survey, but. And if any of this piqued your interest and you haven't had a chance to see the full report, they are posted on the intranet. If you go to employee resources and then select the Iowa Department of Public Health, you'll see both the 2016 and the 2017 results there. And of course, you're welcome to contact me for any questions, or if you actually want raw data in a particular area. And now, bingos? Yay, just pass it around again. So I think you're ready.
Okay.
Can you leave your PowerPoint up
Yeah.
and take it back to that summary? the
Oh,
themes
sorry to make
slide?
anybody dizzy. This one?
No,
Oh,
there's 5 themes toward the end of the PowerPoint.
the comments.
Yeah, comment themes. So let me put you on the spot
Okay.
on one, because I'm not just remembering this offhand. Structural and building improvement, what was that, do you remember?
There were some people who asked for an emblem on our elevator to identify what floor IDPH is actually located on. There were some comments about building access or safety, so could you get into the building, if you're supposed to be here at 7, can you get here into the building physically at 7? And then some of the doors maybe not closing all the way as a safety precaution for those people that are coming in. I think having the active shooter training this over the past year may have sparked some of those comments too, and recognizing a need for those.
Okay, that's great, thank
You're
you.
testing my memory.
Well, you brought it up, so
Okay.
I just want to be sure I was aware too. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing as a result of the survey. You've taken your time to fill it out, give us your feedback along the way. I think it was exciting to see the numbers increasing. That's really terrific. Feel like that gives your management team a sense that we're hitting some traction here. We're heading the right direction. I'm not surprised that communication continues to be an area that we've got challenges. I think for anybody that's been in organizations for any amount of time, that is a challenge. You know, how much to communicate, how frequently to communicate, how to push information out that's people will read as opposed to a data dump. There's just a lot of different challenges with that. So the executive team has been through the survey, and we've had, I think, at least a couple of conversations about the survey. Particularly, we've talked about communications. And so there's a couple of things I just wanted to highlight that we've already done. And then I'd like to get your feedback on an item or two in particular. First of all, we know we need to do more communicating. We can't communicate enough, right? I think that's probably a truism of working in an organization. And so what we can communicate, how frequently, is always a challenge. But no, I think that's something that we recognize we have to do more of. I think there was either a comment, must have been a comment in the survey about financial communication. And I want to seed that in your head for a minute. And I'm going to talk about some other things we're doing, but then I want to come back to that one to get your feedback. And so this is the interactive portion of the presentation. I'm interested in knowing if we were to communicate more actively on the financials for the department, what information you'd want to get. Maybe the who, what, when, where, how sort of thing about financials. We've had a lot of conversation at executive team about how to get that done, what people are looking for, how much information, who they want to hear it from, in what context, those kinds of things. So take that and kind of mull that over, and I'll come back to that. One of the things that we determined at executive team to do was, for some time, I think for some years, maybe more than a decade, we've been doing a director's report on a monthly basis. And I think that information was pushed out to staff as a way to kind of give you a data download on what's going on in the department. But I think it's turned into quite a lengthy report. And no one was confident that there was being much use made of that among staff. A lot of folks reading it, perhaps too much information, too much of a data dump, and not enough of a fine-tuned communication. So both as a way to kind of reestablish communication, but also relieve burden of reporting that, we've stopped that, we've discontinued that report along the way. But what we want to do is use the quick reads as a way of communicating maybe a more targeted message, more focused, something that's a little easier to digest along the way. And so we're making quick reads distribution to everybody. Okay? Used to be something you can opt into, now you can't opt into it anymore because you're in. You're in automatically. So we want you to get that, and we're going to be using that, and we've been using that for, I think, quite a while as a strategic communication tool. I think mostly with people outside the agency, but I think there's also a lot of relevance here in the department to employee consumption of that document. You know, in the last, I think, a couple of years, we've included data in there because we want people to understand that data is important to us, and not only as a way to inform, probably not even quite as a way to inform, but as a way to raise attention to the fact that data is meaningful and we use data and where you can go to find it. And so we're trying to use data from that standpoint to help re-emphasize the importance that we place on assessment and try to also seed things like the environmental health, public health portal, the tracking portal as a mechanism to try to serve whatever your programmatic interest might be, to raise awareness to that. So quick reads, again, that's something, I think, have we turned that on yet? Is everybody getting quick reads now? Yeah, okay. So hopefully you'll see that as a value add, that you're getting that, and if it's not, of course, you can just delete it. But take advantage of that information that you're going to get through that tool. We've decided to, we did the town hall, that was in the fall, I think. December, okay, yeah, okay, we did that. We decided to do that twice a year instead of once a year to try to get everybody together. You know, when we did it in December, we did it around employee recognition, and we'll keep doing that. But we decided that also doing one, I think we're talking about July, right? So timed with the fiscal year start. So I think, as everybody knows here, with that being a significant time frame in terms of fiscal year, starting new programs, those kinds of things. So we'll do that again in July as a way to communicate what's coming up for the year as well. So instead of once a year, twice a year. Sarah mentioned this in her presentation. I think our sense is these gatherings are going well. This is a good way for us to regularly push information out and engage people in a conversation on topics. It's a little smaller venue, which is why we do a couple when we do them every month. But we also want to make sure attendance is up. And so, like any good thing you do it for a while, and interest, it becomes old hat. Interest wanes perhaps a little bit along the way. So we want to try to also reinvigorate these. So suggest to your colleagues, your next door neighbors in your offices, that they ought to be taking advantage of this. We'll continue to use this as a way to talk about accreditation, we'll talk about budget, we'll talk about strategic plan, we'll talk about FAB accreditation, we'll cover a lot of material here in context of these meetings. So we're going to continue to focus on using these as well. And just generally with the website, looking for ways to cross-fertilize also in the department. We know that there's a lot of programs that put out newsletters, and sometimes they're not easy for people to find. If you're in tobacco, for example, you might be interested in knowing what's going on in chronic disease, but it might not be that friendly to find those communications. So we want to create some mechanism on our intranet site or the website to try to find those newsletters when you've got interest in those. And also with descriptions on how to enroll in those. So if you want to get them on a regular basis as a way to try to keep everybody informed about all the good work that's going on in the department. I think there was a suggestion in the employee survey about posters. There's a lot of work we do, I think, as you all know, around the development of posters for programs, for academic purposes, those kinds of things, for presenting new ideas or talking about things that we've done that are being particularly impactful, just as a learning point. And yet we don't have a way of sharing those posters with staff, which is a loss, I think, for us. Because we'll take it to a conference, right? We'll share it with everybody from across the country at that conference, but people in our own agency often don't get the benefit of seeing that information. So we're talking about making an area available in the 6th floor lobby to get that done. So when we find that, you'll hopefully start seeing some of those poster presentations posted out there. So come up to 6, check things out. Actually, are we going to get a cafeteria?
We are.
Well, there you go. Another reason to come to 6. So hopefully we'll be able to get that done. So as you're interested in topics, or you have a poster that you'd like to have posted up in that area, let us know. And of course, as we get that all confirmed up, we'll get that information out to everybody as well. So let me come back to the financial communication. And just, again, I'm interested in getting your feedback along the way. You know, unlike a lot of organizations, obviously our books are open, right? This is a public organization, and what we do here is all public information. And yet, I think it's hard for us in a lot of cases to make financial information that's useful and friendly and descriptive and informative available to everybody. Division directors, bureau chiefs, program managers get that from a business standpoint, but not everybody gets that information. Some of the things as executive team talked about this, we struggled with, well, how much information? You know, we've got 90 programs in the department. We've got $200 million in spending per year from various sources. How to make that information meaningful and useful without being a data dump, without being too much, and also give folks an opportunity to not only be informed but also ask questions about what we're reading, why it is as it is, how do we get those questions answered as well. So we decided to turn it back to you and ask you, when you posed that comment in the survey, what did you have in mind? What kinds of information would be valuable and useful for all staff in the department? You know, is it graphic presentation? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it maybe just information in the program area that you work? Or just what are you interested in knowing about financial reporting? So this is the interactive portion. So what do you think? And Marcia's taking notes. I see her with her pen out. She's writing it down. What do you think?
I would like to know where our money is coming from. Like, who are our major funders, what
Okay.
percentage, does that shift a lot, does it not shift a lot?
Okay.
I don't have a good idea about that.
So what I hear you saying there might be not even a monthly report in this case, but maybe an occasional report, quarterly,
Yeah.
maybe, about who's supporting the agency financially. How much federal dollars, grants from nonprofit organizations, fees, those kinds of things. Okay, good. Marcia, would you take notes on that? Okay. She did have her pen on, I'm not kidding on that. So. Yeah, Denise?
I didn't write the note, or the comment, but as I sat here, and I read through HHS and the appropriations, I think when we look through those, we look at those things that may impact our program, but it's very difficult to put it all together in one place. So even maybe an identification, this is state funds, it's kind of feeding off what Joy said. This is state funds, but this is how much we're getting for the programs, for each program from state funding and maybe federal funding, and then maybe, so I'm perhaps looking for a little more detail than percentage.
Yeah.
Although I'd probably be okay with percentages.
Yeah. But again, you're talking about revenue coming in,
Correct.
right? So it
Well,
wouldn't necessarily be a monthly report,
No.
but an occasional report
Yeah.
that would give you a little better information about where various sources are supporting programs.
And I don't think expenditures, not necessarily in detail, but I think some expenditures as well to say, this is the revenue we've got coming in, how are we doing? Because I think on that question sometimes is I know how the department is doing, and I don't know that I know how we're doing without seeing both revenue and expenditures, not
Okay.
necessarily in great detail, because that is part of the budget.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be, for example, we talked about, do people want the I-3 reports every month? They're not very user-friendly at all, as a matter of fact. And so they're kind of, I see a lot of smiles here for those that get them, making sense out of them.
I think quarterly, every 6 months would be sufficient.
More of a summary, but both revenues and expenses on both sides. Okay. What else? Yeah, Betsy.
Two things. So I think that especially after this legislative session, with all of the budget cuts we've gotten from the state, seeing kind of how those budget cuts are impacting, it's hard to tell if we don't have a big picture of what the department's budget is, what a, 1.3 million cut to this area looks like.
Okay.
So understanding kind of that, as well as I think the department's plan as far as how do we absorb those cuts and how is that going to impact the work that we do.
Yeah. Okay, stay tuned. Right.
And the
I'm
other-
gonna talk about budget before we're done here, so.
The other piece that I wanted to mention is that data.iowa.gov has a lot of financial information on
Okay.
it. It is kind of just a big data dump, but, you know, we could try to look at that as a resource to kind of, how do we guide staff to look at meaningful pieces on there.
Good idea. Good. Yeah, Sarah.
I would love for people to know how much of our money doesn't stay here at the department, how much we're sending out to local public health, our contractors, and I think that that's important for legislators to know too, that we're not just bringing in all this cash and hoarding it, but we're giving it out to other people.
And those are percentages, Marcia, I know you guys have fine-tuned those every year. And I use those as I make my presentation to the governor every year for our budget requests. And it's a very large percentage of all the revenues. Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, it seems like for general funds, it's about 84%, if I recall correctly, when we did that math, or for you, Gerd. And the federal it's not as high because we have so much of administrative expenses that are paid from federal grants, so I don't recall that off the top of my head,
But understanding that,
Yes, and I
what's
think that's
going out
valuable for the
to
other people
locals
too.
and others, right? Okay, good. Good idea. What else? What other things would be useful for us to provide? I'm not hearing anybody say, I want a monthly spreadsheet that goes through revenues and expenses and that kind of thing. If somebody wants that, let's, say that. But this is where I think we were struggling a little bit, how much information, because there is a lot. John?
In our bureau meetings, we used to get, and I think Marcia actually provided it, but it was a pie chart that showed the percentage of federal, state, other, and the state, the general funds and all that. And I mean, we got those on like a quarterly basis maybe, and it just helped give you a better feel for where we were at. So I think that's something that's kind of already developed that might be useful.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts or suggestions, Sarah?
I get to think about this more because I knew the question was coming, but our money, for how we allocate that around our strategic planning too, just kind of that
Okay.
idea of where, are we putting our money where our mouth is?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, I think that's where, accountability, I think most everybody knows the Lieutenant Governor was here this morning, and I met with her for about half an hour before, and one of the topics I talked about with her was budget and what we've been through this last legislative session. And, the governor's been very supportive when we've talked about flexibility, and the Lieutenant Governor's also been very supportive along the way. And she gets the accountability thing, which is when we talk about flexibility, it comes with accountability. It's got to come together. And so we want to be accountable, but this is part of that as well. If we say we're going to go down this road from a strategic standpoint, understanding what our investments are that are being made to that plan, so that's being accountable. That's good. Other suggestions? We won't belabor it, but yeah.
I think there are people like me in this room, or probably I am the only one who needs a 101 class on these terms, because you just mentioned the form there, I-something.
I3.
I don't know what that
Yeah.
is. I have never been exposed to that.
Great.
Or never wanted to be exposed.
Maybe the latter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's good. That's good feedback. We throw terms around. I mean, we do that broadly in public health anyway, but knowing the terms and what they mean for financing is good. Okay. Well, as you have other ideas, let your bureau chiefs, let your division directors know. We'll use this feedback to go back and talk about what information we can make available to get that done, and we'll figure out how to get it out. I think posting it on the intranet site, sending it as an email, maybe we can post things on a bulletin board. We'll figure out a way to get that done, to make it easy. Again, it's easy, useful, informative, without trying to snow you with too much information that's overly complex when you don't really even understand the terms. So, okay. I wanted to talk for just a minute about the executive scorecards. John, Durbin, and Sarah working aggressively with you all around what we're terming the executive scorecards, our performance management system. I really appreciate how everybody has stuck with this. It can be one of those things, I think, especially at the outset, that's daunting. You know, there's a lot of things we can measure. And sometimes, you know, you begin like a funnel and you throw a lot in at the top because the funnel's wide, and then over time you kind of filter things down to the things that, well, that changes frequently, or this is meaningful, and here's the subset now of things that we really want to manage. We're still in a wide part of the funnel, which really creates a lot of work, and I think we want to try to force this down to a smaller subset of things that we're measuring. And of course, the executive scorecard, you know, the purpose of the scorecard exercise, there's multiple purposes for it from my standpoint. It gives me an opportunity to understand what's going on in the department in some critical areas. Things that change frequently, things that are important strategically and otherwise. It also gives me material to talk with the governor and lieutenant governor about, and the director of the department of management about things that we're doing. And I do that. I want you to know I do that. On more than one occasion, I've taken some of those reports over and handed them out with the governor and lieutenant governor, walked them through what's there. And they like that. And it gives them an understanding of what's going on. But I think the other thing it tells them is I'm paying attention. And these are the things I'm paying attention to. And I want them to know that we're also actively managing around those things as well. So the efforts that you're making are very much appreciated. They are impactful, they're very useful. And I think now we're in that process where we really need to kind of get this focused in, down on the things that we really want to focus on, that I want to focus on. There may be other things at a program level you want to keep measuring, and that's perfectly good. I would hope that there are some things that you say, well, I may say, well, I'm no longer interested in that, or I just don't have the bandwidth to do that, but Ken, Marcia, Sarah, Marcus, others, you guys should continue to monitor that. And so hopefully there will be some things that we'll continue to manage along the way. Eventually, I really want to see those scorecards posted on the web. That's kind of my goal. And I think that promotes transparency. You know, we need to be transparent with the work that we're doing. It's not just, you know, well, it was funny because as the lieutenant governor was walking around today, she was impressed with how clean the floors are. And I think we know that some areas are more clean than others, right? So I wasn't quite transparent with her on all of that. But the same is true here. You know, we want to be transparent. We want to be clear about how we're performing. And it's not just selecting the good things, but it's also being clear about the things maybe we're underperforming in and saying, you know, we know it, we recognize it, and we're going to work on it. You know, within resources and expertise, we're going to work on that. But we're going to put that information out for public consumption. I think, frankly, it also gives us an opportunity to say the same thing with our local contractors. For us to be able to say, well, look, we're being transparent. Here's how we're doing. How are you doing? Tell us how you're doing. Be transparent like we are. We can lead by example on that. And I think that's critically important in the government space. Let's see. I think we're supposed to be done at 12, right? Is that right? Okay. So let me pivot quickly to budget. Somebody's already mentioned earlier, this was a tough legislative session for the department. We were the final action when the legislature adjourned on Saturday morning. Was it Saturday morning? Yeah, Saturday morning, 7:15 a.m. They went all night. Not atypical. Was they reduced the department's budget by $8.3 million as compared to the start of fiscal year 17. So you know we've been through some iterations here. At the start of 17, we had one number. Mid-year, then we went through a reduction. Was it $2.3 million?
Yes.
Yeah. And now the final budget we're going to have for 18, I'm comparing back to the very start of 17. Okay. So it's like $8.3 million less. than we had at the start of fiscal year 17. The legislature went through and made some selective reductions along the way. So I think you've heard me talk in the past about how heavily earmarked our appropriations bill is. Lots of pots, lots of silos, lots of earmarking, lots of dedicated funds. Many of those pass through our hands to local organizations. I've been arguing for more flexibility in that way. We got a little mix of that in the bill, I would say, at the end of the session. But at the end of the day, they did end up going through last year's bill basically and making selective reductions in programs. So they made, of the $8.3 million in total reductions, now it gets a little bit difficult to compare, right? So they made probably, I don't know, in the neighborhood of $5 million in reductions, I'm going to say. Right, specific line item reductions, either to divisions or bureaus or programs along the way. And then they said to us, they said, you guys do another 1.3 million. You figure it out, right? So they gave us flexibility in that way to go further. Not the flexibility I had in mind, but you know. So we'll take it where we can, because I think it does give us the ability, as Sarah's question suggested earlier about the strategic plan, to think about how we fund strategic areas of interest for the department. You know, I was up in Cherokee yesterday talking with the county public health administrators up in that region, and in fact I'm going to visit them all this week, except for Atlantic. I won't get to Atlantic. And what I told them was, you know, we need to be investing, and that was the term I used. We need to be investing in important activities that really improve health. At the end of the day, that's what we're about, right? It has less to do with funding organizations for activities, right? It has a lot more to do with health outcomes, and we need to be investing for that. Now, saying that's easy, making it happen is a lot harder to do. So that's going to be our challenge, you know, as executive team has been discussing really since the start of the legislative session back in January. We've been actively discussing, you know, the serial reductions that we've been forced to review, and coming up with just more scenarios than you can shake a stick at. And so now we're kind of at the conclusion of that. The legislature's acted. They've taken reductions. They've asked us to take an additional $1.3 million in reductions. And so we're going to go about that task of doing that. But I'm hopeful that we can use our strategic plan as a guide for where those additional reductions will occur. We want to promote our strategy. We want to promote health improvement along the way. We want to promote those things that are going to be impactful of Iowa's health at a broad level, and then be accountable for the work that we do to have that impact. It's not just cutting a budget and walking away and managing activity. We need to be actively thinking about how do we invest those dollars to really have the intended impact that they need to have. So that's the approach that we're going to take. We've been taking that approach. And you know, we talked about this with strategic planning several months ago. You know, we spend time developing that important document, which is our strategic plan. And what that says is if we had our druthers, this is the direction we would go. Sometimes we don't have our druthers. You know, we operate in an environment where the governor is telling us where to go. The legislature tells us where to go and what to do. And so we need to take those directives that we get there, and we value those things. We have to follow through with that work. And then in certain instances, we get flexibility to pursue the other things that we think will make a difference for Iowans' health. So we don't operate in a vacuum. You know, I'd love to be able to say, well, we're going to focus on our strategic priorities. That's what we're about here. I'd love to be able to say that, and I want to say that, but it's tempered by the fact that we don't control everything we do, right? And there are some things that a strategic plan just can't address. You know, we're going to continue doing all of the other things that we're required and things that we find valuable to do for health improvement. And all of you here represent variations of that theme. You know, most of the opportunities that I'd like to see is equipping the agency to be effective. When we've had growth in the budget, where we've had that growth is in funding that's going out to organizations. You know what? They're all doing great work. It's not like they're not doing good work. Everybody's doing good work. But facing a 13 to 14% reduction, we need to be really thinking hard about those things that, and you know, I anticipate we're going to have to stop doing some things. I mean, the legislature has already asked in their bill that we stop doing some things. And because we've got additional cuts to make, that may need to go further. And that's a little disconcerting, you know, because I think as an agency, we're doing good work. And so we're going to have to make some hard decisions. And so as we go through that process, we will for sure be in communication with bureau chiefs. Of course, division directors will be at the table helping make those decisions as well, and then eventually with staff as well. And we're going to have to make decisions fairly quickly, right? Because that whole budget starts July 1st. So that was kind of a downer thing to end on. So I've got a few other things I could mention quickly. FAB accreditation. Joy's pulled the trigger, and we've submitted our letter of application on March 31st. So now we're on the hook. We got to go there, right? So the plan is to submit the full application by the end of December of this year. So, and that's where the map comes into play. So we're going to put this map, probably travel maybe around the department for a while. I've asked for some consideration that it be put up near my office on 6th floor for starters, but we'll make sure it gets around for those who don't get up to 6th floor frequently. But you can see the 12 domains, and I think the intent here is you'll notice a map in the background, right? That's the bars are portions of the Iowa map. And as we make progress in completing our work in those domains for the application, the bar will get bigger. So congratulations to the group that's working on domain 10. They're doing great work. And shame on domain 12. Me, right? For the lack of progress in that. But this will be a good visual for us just to manage and monitor, and you can monitor with us how it's going in that area. So we'll celebrate the successes, and we'll have hard discussions. I need to get in the mirror and talk to me about domain 12. So anyway, look for that. Look for that on 6th floor and traveling around the department. I'm going to stop there. We've got a couple of minutes left. Any questions, comments, thoughts? I do kind of hate to end with that whole budget story.
You talked about accreditation.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, true. Yeah.
And transparency there.
Transparency.
Full
That's right.
transparency of our budget.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, that's right. I appreciate that. I mean, the reason I'm sharing with you is not to scare anybody. You know, we're all adults here, and that's just the story. You know, we worked hard to try to get a different decision. You know, the governor's budget recommendation for fiscal year 18 was dramatically different than what the legislature appropriated, and so we went over on a continual basis and tried to make the point, look, you know, the budget's not great, but it's not as bad as the budget that you're talking about, and isn't there something that we can do? You know, we argued flexibility, we talked about program goals, those kinds of things, but now, you know, it is what it is, and so we're going to have to figure out the best way to make the best of that. So, questions, thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and have a good rest of your day.